So again, I would like to thank you all for being here today, as well as with your patience with the Zoom technology issues as well. So I would like to start off with thanking our sponsors for tonight, the University of Maine at Farmington, UMF, the Campus Election Engagement Project, otherwise known as CEEP, Pi Sigma Alpha, the Political Science Honor Society at UMF, the UMF College Democrats, the UMF College Republicans, the UMF Independents as well. For off-campus sponsors, we'd like to thank the Franklin County Chamber of Commerce, as well as captioning services sponsored by the League of Women Voters. I will be your moderator tonight. My name is Samantha Wood. I'm a student at the University of Maine at Farmington, as well as the president of Pi Sigma Alpha, as well as seat fellow for the University of Maine at Farmington. We would just like to remind everyone that we are a nonpartisan organization that goes for the Franklin County Chamber of Commerce as well, hosting this event.
Sam, do you have some people waiting?
Let me see. I do not see anyone in the waiting room right now. Yes, I do not see anyone in our current waiting room. Scott, does it look like everyone is here?
Computer. Are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so that link went out. I'll go double check and mute myself now. So yeah, that went through on my end.
Okay. Perfect. I did send it to that Zoom meeting before I ended that Zoom meeting multiple times and made sure to repeat that that was the wrong link for those who were in it. Go. So. We would like to start off with the candidate bios and introductions. There is one candidate who could not be here tonight, that is Senator Black. We were originally planning on doing this a week earlier. However, due to scheduling issues, we had to push it back a week, and unfortunately, that did not work out with his schedule. So he is the only one who is not here tonight. So we'd like to start off with the candidates for them to introduce ourselves. We will start with the Senate race. So if we would have Jan Collins introduce herself first. After that, we will go to District 74, the District 74 candidates, and then the District 112 candidates, followed by 113, 114, 117, and then next the sheriff races, and then Councilor District 1, followed by Councilor District 2. So you folks would like to start?
Thank you so much for having us here, Sam, and thanks for all your work in getting voters registered on campus. It's terrific. I am so glad to be here and glad that everyone that's here is willing to take time out of their busy schedules for this evening. I believe we are shaped by all that happens to us, and our earliest experiences may be the most influential. My parents divorced when I was very young, leaving my mom with 4 children under the age of 5. Anyone who knows my mom knows she's an incredibly hard worker. Even at 87, she works in our blueberry fields and can put younger, hale and hearty people to shame. Caring for her 4 children and putting food on the table was a huge accomplishment. We had a garden, and Mom found work she could do from home. In the summer, she found outdoor work that allowed her to have us nearby. She spent a couple of summers pruning apple trees for Clifford Noyce. I was standing nearby one day when she asked Clifford who else was pruning trees that summer. He looked straight at her and said that he had hired no one else. He didn't need to. She did the work of 7 men. That made me very proud. But the truth is, she didn't make the wages of 7 men, or probably even 1. That early experience taught me that you can work very hard and still not be able to make ends meet, provide enough food or money for her own children's school clothes. My mom taught me the honor of hard work, the importance of a good education, and that everyone has value. When we were in need, I learned the value of community, and I believe that when we all work together to support each other, everyone benefits. Thank you.
Thank you. So next we will go on to Sheila Lineman, who is running for District 74 representative. It appears, Sheila, are you there? No. So we will move on to Christina Riley, who is also running for representative of District 74.
Hello there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. So I am running for a 3rd term in the Maine State Legislature in the House of Representatives. I live in Jay. I represent Jay, Livermore Falls, and part of Livermore. I've been in this seat for 2 terms, and I've served on the Energy, Utilities, and Technology Committee, where I am right up to my elbows in energy, climate change issues, and utilities, and that includes broadband, even though it isn't technically considered a utility yet, but we are certainly working on it. Trying to get broadband into Franklin County and other rural areas of Maine has been one of my big efforts, and also making sure that the very much needed transition to clean energy is the boon that it can be for rural Maine, and not the boondoggle that it could end up being if not managed properly. Kind of been a focus of mine. I am trained as an electrician. I joined the IBEW in 1990, and I went through an apprenticeship there and got a trade. For me, it was a life-changing experience. I went from frontline work where I was doing very little above minimum wage to suddenly having a job with benefits and skills that would carry me through life. I spent all of my life before that pretty much in rank poverty, and I know how bad that is. I know what a trap it is, and I believe that everybody, in order to get out of that, needs to have they need to have a plan. They need to work hard, and they need somebody to give them a break. And finding ways to do that is one of my goals in the legislature. And another one of my favorite topics, my pet interests, is disability rights. When I got to the State House for my freshman term, I realized that the parking lots in the whole State House complex were not ADA compliant. And I noticed that because I have a son who uses a motorized wheelchair. And when we go places and the parking lots aren't striped properly, we end up having a fiasco before we ever even get inside wherever it is that we're going. So I was amazed at how much I had to knock heads in order to get that fixed at the State House complex, but we did. And last year I put through a bill that says that all of the parking lots under the use of the state of Maine would be brought into compliance with federal law. I can't believe we had to fight about it. I can't believe we needed a law to make that happen, but we certainly did. And so that was one of my favorite wins in the State House so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will move on to District 112, and we'll start with Thomas Skolkfield.
Good evening, everyone. How are you doing? Do you hear me okay? Nod or something? I think I'm out there. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this evening and be with you all. And I hope that we were able to learn a lot from one another. I'm serving my third term currently in the Maine State Legislature and hope to be reelected for a fourth term this November. I serve on a couple of committees. I have served on taxation, and I've served on agriculture, conservation, and forestry for the last couple of terms. And last term, the current term, I'm serving on environment and natural resources. Those committees, I believe, are very, very important to the people in our area. Agriculture, conservation, and forestry, environment, and natural resources are two committees that I think I have a great deal of impact on, and two committees that are very important to us here. I'm a 7th generation Maine native. I grew up here in this area. I know the people of this area. I am from this area. I know what people do and how they have to struggle to make a living. And I know how important it is for the folks here who do earn a living to be able to as much of their money as possible and not have to send it to Augusta. And I think that the COVID epidemic has created a very severe crisis in our state financially, and we need to have someone down there who can make the tough decisions to overcome the costs that will be incurred going forward. We need to be able to understand that we cannot always keep things going the way we have, and that there are some decisions that have to be made in the 130th legislature. So I welcome the discussion tonight and look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we will move on to Peter Bourgeois.
Thank you, Sam. And thank you to Scott and all of the various organizations that have put together this event. I was a member actually of Pi Sigma Alpha back when I was a student at UMaine Orono, so it's always good to see other membership of that organization. Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Pete Bourgeois. I am running for House District 112. I've lived in Phillips since 2007. I've lived in Maine since 1993. It is true that I was 3 years old before I first set foot in the state of Maine, but I think it says something good about my judgment that at the tender age of 7, I was able to drag both of my parents north from Boston, one-handed, all the way up here. And I am running for this race because of one thing that Ray Gaudette, who was a selectman here in Phillips, said to me while we were touring tax-acquired properties, trying to think of something to do about them. This town is dying. Rural Maine is dying, and it is going to continue to die unless we make the necessary investments in our area that will bring it into the 21st century. I support switching to a consumer-owned utility from the investor-owned mess that we have with CMP right now, which is not accountable to the people it serves. It's ultimately accountable to foreign governments like Norway and Qatar. If we had a consumer-owned utility in this area, we can make the necessary investments in a modern green energy grid that will create jobs in this area, broaden the property tax base, and lower the property tax burden on taxpayers all across rural Maine. And it can also provide broadband as well. Like a lot of students at UMF, like a lot of people on this call, I struggle with the lack of high-speed internet in this area. At my day job, I'm a 3D artist for a company down in Portland. and I regularly have to send large files to them that can take hours to finish. We are not going to be able to create quality, good paying jobs in this area without high-speed internet. And I believe that the public-private partnership model that the state is pushing currently asks for all too much from our municipalities. But because consumer-owned utilities can also offer broadband, and I will support any bill that makes that happen, we can create finally some competition for internet in rural Maine, which is currently severely hampered by population density, and finally do for broadband what we did for electrification during the New Deal. So this election, I believe, is about who is really going to work with the majority in the state legislature to finally make the investments in rural Maine that can bring it back to life. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will move on to Scott Landry, who's running for District 113. Scott, are you there? Nope. So we will move on to Stefan.
Sam, Scott is there. I can see him. Sorry to interrupt, but I can see Scott there. I think he's just having a little bit of a audio difficulty. But
I think he might be on mute.
Okay.
I'll send him a text message.
Sorry to interrupt you, Sam.
No, it's okay. Thank you. I can't see everyone on my screen right now, so I appreciate it.
Sam, as the controller, you should be able to send him an invite to his audio. He's struggling with the audio, but you send him an invite, he just clicks on it.
I'm going to put my IT hat on again. He doesn't appear as though he doesn't have the microphone with the slash through it, so I think he's just having audio difficulty. If I can make a suggestion, Scott, you should be able to dial in on your cell phone for audio if your computer is not working for audio.
If you click up on the microphone button for microphone, you can switch to phone audio. Well, we give him time to do that. We'll come back to him after, but we'll go to Stefan Bunker, who is running for one.
Hello?
Hello.
Got two systems
I do.
running now, Sam.
I'll leave and come back.
I think if everyone mutes and then unmutes, we'll.
Hello?
We can hear you, Scott.
All right, perfect.
Am I there now?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
I've been able to see everybody just fine and hear everybody. And I didn't do it. I'm Scott Landry. I live here in Farmington with my wife, Brenda, on a small farm. I currently represent Farmington and New Sharon in District 113, and I have really enjoyed it. I serve on the Inland Fishery and Wildlife Committee, which is a very nonpartisan committee. I really feel like I got spoiled by getting placed on there. Everything we do comes out unanimous. And that's the way things should be down there. You have to get talk. I'm looking at my friend Steve Bunker. We sit on the same board, and 99% of what we do comes out unanimous. So there's no reason for the infighting. You have to sit down and talk with your friends and not your friends and work things out. I came from the insurance business. I have a history of helping people. I didn't represent the company. I represented both the company and the insured, and you had to get things right for both people to make it work. And I think I can do that in Augusta. The pandemic brought on a lot of problems for everybody, but it made me feel satisfied to be able to help people. I had more phone calls requesting help with unemployment, concerns about people coming to Rangeley from Massachusetts, wanting them not to come, then wanting them to come again. It's been fun, but I've been able to represent people and help people. And that's what I would continue to do if you reelect me to District 113. I think that's the one I'm in. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will move on to Stefan Bunker, who is also running for 113.
Thank you very much for that. And Scott, thank you for recognizing we do very well on the board together, and much of us are on like minds of that. And I've always appreciated that. I had folks kind of summarizing up where I've been and what I've been doing all these years, and I figured out that I've been serving the public for over 50 years now. My wife would say, don't say half a century, it makes you feel old. But from the time I enlisted in the Army back during the Vietnam era and on through 26 years of service with them, and come Thanksgiving, it'll be my 42nd year as a volunteer firefighter in town. Former police officer, deputy sheriff, EMT. I think I'm in my 25th year on the board of select persons, and serving the public is just something that I love, and it's just come to me naturally, but perhaps because my folks brought me up to try to recognize to do something well every day to make it sound that it was worthwhile for you being here. And I've become very, very rich in helping to serve the public, certainly not in dollars, but the people that I have met, the friendships that I've gained, the help that I've been able to provide for folks makes me even more motivated to want to continue to serve. And it's been very rewarding at the municipal level, including 11 years on the executive committee at Maine Municipal Association and twice their president. That really got me involved in dealing with the legislature, the governor's office, and also with Congress. So I'd like to take it another touch and bring in some new ideas and a fresh face, if you will, to the legislature. The folks that I found, those that would door knock for me or walk up my road and talk with me, it's farmers, it's foresters, it's small business, and it's people that are in greatest risk that I'm looking to try to assist. Also, my work as commander of my local American Legion post, we've got some veterans who have been there when we needed them, but they're not coming back whole. So for me to focus on services to try to get them reacclimated back into the public, again, it would be an emphasis that I would want to put on. Sue Pratt would know this, but as a recent member of the Rotary Club, their theme of service before self is something that I just feel is so apropos and appropriate. And I want to get into the legislature. I want to try to moderate the growth in the legislature, to keep them lean and focused on things that are best for them, to be less intrusive with public policy issues and intruding themselves into our individual rights themselves. To try to find a way to reduce taxes and, quite frankly, continue to reduce red tape for small businesses, because they're the ones that are employing folks here and putting money in people's pockets. So I'll be there to help as best I can, and look forward to your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Greg Kimber, who is running for District 114.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you, Sam. Thanks, Scott, for everybody putting this together. It's nice to see all my fellow candidates, and thanks to everyone else for listening in. I thought I'd just, as an intro, outline some of the things that I'm concerned about, priority issues for me, and try to tie those into my life experience a little bit. So one of my big concerns is the environment. I was born and raised here in Temple. I grew up swimming and fishing in the ponds around here, skiing at Titcomb and on the local snowmobile trails, eating out of the family garden. And I love the land around here, and I feel like it's something we really need to protect. We have something special here in Maine, and for its own sake and also for our economy, I think it's important that we make that a priority. Another thing that's been on my mind is concerns about demographic trends here in Maine. We're the oldest state in the country. More people are retiring. We don't have enough young people to fill in the gaps. This is especially worrying in the healthcare and home care fields, as the proportion of older folks who need care grows and our pool of younger workers shrinks. And it's something I see around me as my parents' generation ages and faces the challenge that, that goes along with that. I have to confess, I spent most of my 20s and 30s outside of Maine. I was drawn away by opportunities outside the state. So finding ways to attract young Mainers, new Mainers to the state and keep them here is a priority for me. And then the other thing that stands out is the pressing issue of the coronavirus and the economic fallout from that. So I know Maine will be facing a pretty massive revenue shortfall, and I do think now is the time to look at rolling back some of the tax breaks that have been given to the wealthiest in the state. I personally can't complain, but most of the jobs I've had over the years have not been big money makers, even if they've been personally fulfilling. I've done a lot of work with people, daycare centers, working with disabled folks and teaching ESL. But honestly, one of the reasons I moved back home, aside from wanting to spend more time with my folks, was because I was getting tired of sinking a big chunk of my paycheck every month into rent. So I think I can relate to working people being on a tight budget, trying to balance living expenses, rent, healthcare costs, maybe student loans, and then having to factor in taxes as well. So I just think now more than ever, we need to be helping working people out. And that would be my priority as a legislator. So thanks everyone, and looking forward to more discussion.
Thank you. Next, we will move on to Randy Hall, who is also running for District 114.
He's not on. He wasn't able to make the transition.
Okay. All right. So it looks like we will move on to Savannah Sessions, who is running for District 117.
Hello, everyone. I'm Savannah Sessions. Thank you so much for having us tonight. This is great. It's great to see everybody. I am also a lifelong Mainer. I was born and raised in Norway. I did go away for college, and then I came back as soon as I could. I've lived in Bethel for the past 12 years, and District 117 has over 20 towns and townships, several of which are in Franklin County. Many more are in Oxford County, so we get the added benefit of a split between a couple of different counties. Over the years, I've held a number of jobs, from farming to banking to customer service and retail work and being a restaurant server. But I guess I consider myself an educator and school librarian now, mostly professionally. And I recently changed jobs, so now I'm the executive director of the Bethel Historical Society, which is great because I get to combine all of the things I love, like local history, and library work and museum work, and I get to do it right in my hometown where I have lots of roots, and it's really fun. It makes every day a little bit longer though, because anybody who calls wants to find out how we're related exactly. So I am a volunteer ski patroller, and I coach youth sports, and I work with my local food pantry, and just generally enjoy community service as a big part of my life. And so when I get to Augusta, I plan to focus on issues that matter to people who live here, like affordable health care and broadband. I know, we're living in a pandemic, so care in the front of our minds. A lot of us work a few part-time jobs that add up to a full-time job or more, and that doesn't provide us with health care. So I know that's a big one for Maine people. And of course, broadband. I worked with elementary school students. I still work with elementary school students, and remote learning is a challenge. One Zoom meeting of a pre-K class can use up all of the bandwidth that a family has for the month. So that's obviously not a sustainable model. So we need to work on getting broadband into every home in Western Maine. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for hosting.
Thank you. Next, we will move on to Fran Head, who is also running for District 117. Bryn, are you there? No? Okay, so we will move on to Scott Nichols, who is running for sheriff.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with everybody tonight. My name is Scott Nichols. My family started here over 200 years ago in East Livermore on the Campground Road. We've been here since before Maine was a state. I've lived in Farmington, born and raised in Farmington. I've been married to my wife, Lorna, for 36 years. We have 2 children and 2 grandchildren, and I've been in law enforcement for 36 years. I started off my law enforcement career in 1984 with the Maine State Police and patrolled Franklin County. And during my time in the state police, I spent 10 years in patrol here in Franklin and Somerset County. I also spent 10 years as an investigator for the homicide unit, and also spent 15 years within that time as a member of the state's special weapons and tactical unit. During my time with the state police, I spent 1 year hiatus over in Iraq as an advisor to the Iraqi police, came back, and eventually became chief of Carrabassett Valley in Carrabassett. Spent 5 years there as a police chief. And then in 2012, I decided to run for sheriff with my wife's blessing, and was fortunate enough to be elected back then, and been serving as sheriff of Franklin County ever since. And I must tell you that being sheriff of Franklin County has been the pinnacle of my law enforcement career. It's been more than gratifying. The ability to work with people on a daily basis and have instant communication. If people have issues, all they do is call me up. We can respond quickly to those issues. There's no flagpole to run up and down to. There's no chain of command. It all begins and ends with me. And we're very responsive, and that's what we look forward to continuing doing. During my time, in the past 8 years as sheriff, we've been able to return the jail to full-time status, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but actually it is a huge deal. And not only that, but we're also generating revenue as a result of it. So that's all good stuff. It's going to be plugging the holes that we have built in within the jail, our budget, but that's a discussion for another time. But again, I appreciate the time to talk to everybody, and I'm always open. If you ever wanted to speak to me, just call me at the office, 778-2680. I'm always available. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Edward Hastings, who is also running for sheriff.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having us. My name is Eddie Hastings, and I am running for Franklin County Sheriff. I am currently a patrol sergeant for the Farmington Police Department and have been serving in this capacity since 2012. In addition to my police duties, I've been the fire and EMS chief in Livermore Falls for the past 4.5 years. I have been a licensed EMT and firefighter since graduating high school, which was all thanks to classes which I took right here at the Foster Technology Center. I am looking forward to the opportunity to use my lifelong dedication in public safety to focus on the following areas as our next sheriff: substance abuse and misuse and drug overdoses, employee retention, mental health services, and being more community-oriented and getting involved as the sheriff. Through my career, I have personally investigated many drug cases and have seen the effects it is having on our community. There is always room for improvement, and we need to do more. I am just over midway through my law enforcement career, and I'm eager to work on ways we can improve employee retention to keep my coworkers on the job. Mental health services are at an all-time high, especially here in Franklin County. I would like to work with our medical providers to come up with solutions on ways that we can better serve the needs of our residents. I am also eager to get more involved on a local level with our community as sheriff. I want people to see me throughout the community, stopping into businesses or visiting with community members. We need to show our deputies the value of being directly involved in the community. This will open our communication with our residents and has the ability to change the way they see us. With all of the attention that police officers are getting in these times, we need people to understand that we are just regular people too, trying to do a job. I want to thank you guys again very much for having this forum for us to be here today. Thank you again.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Terrence Braun, who is running for County Commissioner for District 1.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello. My name is Terry Brand. I was born in Farmington, raised in East Wilton, went to a four-room schoolhouse, went to Wilton Academy, and indeed was uphill both ways. If anybody knows the road from East Wilton to Wilton, they'll understand what I'm talking about. I married Cheryl. We have 2 children, 4 grandchildren, and 7 great-grandchildren. I spent 9 years as a Wilton Select Board member, and I've been 3 years on the County Budget Committee, and I've been a commissioner for the last 4 years. I really enjoy doing what I have been doing, and I enjoy talking to all the people through campaigning and in the courthouse. The times are really hard, really tough for most of the people that I've been talking to throughout my campaign so far, which I want to mention that people keep stealing my signs. If they would like to have one, just call me and I'll donate one. Stop stealing my signs. I'm a lifetime member of NRA. I'm a member of SAM. I support hunting, and I support the woods and the fishing and the area. We need to keep the taxes down. So many people are in poverty. It's just amazing. This is not the time to raise taxes. This is the time to pull back, reassess what we need and what's most important. And that seems to be jobs in this county. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Tiffany Murray, who is also running for County Commissioner for District 1.
Thank you so much, Sam. Appreciate it. So after spending more than 3,000 days at sea as a U.S. Merchant Marine officer, I looked around and decided, where do I want to settle down? And I recognize now, as I do then, that Franklin County was a place that I wanted to live, work, recreate, and really to raise a family. I fostered 5 children, adopted 1, Becca, who also brought into my life, my great joy, my grandson, Gabriel. I did go to school at UMF. I'm a graduate there, and I'm also a University Main System employee with my primary office at UMF. I work in information technology and senior management, and I have significant budgetary responsibility. I manage a multi-million-dollar budget for my department, so I deal with budgets day in and day out. And as a businesswoman, I recognize that we need to work together to work efficiently and effectively and to spend wisely. Now, during this pandemic, I've taken on additional responsibilities at UMF within the Emergency Operations Center to protect each other and our communities. On the public side of my life, I'm entering my 8th year on the Wilton Select Board, 3 of those as chairperson. I'm also known as a consensus builder. I listen attentively to new ideas, and I find compromise for the betterment of our community. I really believe in shared values and looking out for our neighbors. But we do this, we keep taxes from rising and really look out to make sure that the community is well served. That's why I came here. That's why I remain here, is I believe the beauty of Franklin County itself is much like the people. You know, we are one together. I'm also a volunteer State of Maine disaster responder. I'm the Medical Reserve Corps team leader for District 3, which includes Franklin County. I'm an active volunteer, my church, member of the Wilton Lions Club, Wilton Fish and Game, a parishioner of St. Rose of Lima in Jay. I'm an avid outdoor enthusiast. I love to hunt, fish, and hike. And I do believe that we can change the culture of the commissioners and be able to provide services in a very cost-effective way that doesn't raise taxes and really lessens bureaucracy. Thank you.
And thank you. Next, we'll move on to Lance Harville, who is running for County Commissioner District 2.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for putting this on, Sam. Thanks to the clubs. I actually was born in Farmington, grew up in the area, served in the United States Air Force for about 5 years, really the only extended period of time that I've been away from Franklin County, where I spent about 4 years in Holland, where I made one of the best decisions of my life. I'm not sure she did, but I married a Dutch girl named Bernadette. We've been married for 34 years, raised 2 children in the area. I did become a non-traditional student and graduated from UMF in my 40s. I worked at a paper mill for about almost 30 years, a paper mill that is now in some serious trouble. And I served along the way, or the better part of a decade in the Maine legislature. I will say this, that we can have a lot of plans on what we're going to do right now, but currently this is a situation we face as I see it. The J Mill blew up a large section of it. There's going to be a reevaluation of that mill, which is going to certainly drop the evaluation of the town of Jay. Being in education right now and teaching, for this is my 3rd year, we're seeing what COVID has done to the student enrollment in the various schools, which means that the state share of education to the various communities is going to be less than it was because their numbers will be less. That coupled with the fact that we have a $1.4 billion shortfall in Augusta, and almost certainly a couple of the areas that are going to be hit to make that up are going to be curtailing education cost and or revenue sharing, both of which potentially are driving the tax bill much more onto property taxes. And we have the oldest population in the United States, which means we have the largest percentage of people that are on fixed incomes. And one of the things that I always felt when I was in the legislature was that when you're in the legislature, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of lobby groups that are down there to affect legislation, but the group that's least talked about is the taxpayer. And I've always thought that they needed a bigger voice in almost all the decisions that have been made. And I think that is true of the county commissioners as well. COVID has also opened up an opportunity. And it's something that I have looked at over the years, and it's important how we get it done. But I do agree with one of the early callers that you can look at the rural electrification model as in principle on how you can deliver broadband to this area. Because one of the things that is happening with COVID is there's been a movement away from urban areas into rural areas. Now, how long that lasts, we don't know. And then there's also been a movement where people are working from home. And all of these things are things that we do need to take advantage of, or attempt to take advantage of here in Franklin County and rural areas. But it's very, very important how it gets done. Just because there's a good idea, I actually served on the Energy Committee with Tina on here, and I know quite a lot of you from over the years, but there's all kinds of ideas that come up, but it is very important how these things get done. So it's not just a matter of throwing money at it, because all too often that becomes the solution. One other thing I would like to say, if I'm elected selectman, I would like to see the meetings for the selectmen move to the afternoon. And the rationale for that is, whether or not taxpayers decide to come to these meetings, they should at least be available to them so that they don't have to take a day off to go do this. And I do think that's quite important as well, that you can get as much as a community involvement as possible. And a good start to that would be that the people that are out working during the days paying the bills could at least, if there was going to be a meeting, have it. We hold our town meetings in the evening. I don't see why we can't hold that meeting in the evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And last but not least, we will move on to Fenwick Fowler, who is also running for County Commissioner District 2.
Thank you. My name is Sven Fowler, and I'm running for County Commissioner in District 2, and that covers the towns of Farmington, New Sharon, and Chesterville. I came to Farmington over 50 years ago to go to the University of Maine at Farmington, and I never left. I graduated from UMF in 1973 with a degree in mathematics, and then began working in the community. And for 40 years, I worked at an organization called Western Maine Community Action. They're a social service organization that's existed here for 55 years. And their motto really is to help people and change lives. And they operated programs such as family planning, the Career Center, did a lot of work around energy, a lot of work around housing. They ran children's programs, started Head Start in our community, ran the WIC program. And their major premise was, as an organization, was to engage the community and find out from the community of what they perceived the needs were, and then work with the community to develop the solutions to those. We found really that honestly, the most local solutions were the best. They were the ones that people were invested in, and they were sustained for a long period of time. And I hope to bring that to county government, because we're really faced with an extraordinary challenge. We're one of the rim counties, and that means they're usually one of the ones that recover the slowest from any sort of economic downturn. I think we recovered out of 16 counties in the state of Maine, we were 14th to recover from 2008. And there's probably a reason for that. It's probably how our economy is shaped. We're resource-based. We're also really based on tourism. So when I hear that we ought to make sure to cut taxes, I think we really need to look at the data. We need to ask ourselves some questions. Who pays those taxes, and how much do they pay? In Farmington, 6.1% of your property taxes, or in my case, I'm an average taxpayer. I pay on a house that's valued at $150,000, I pay $142. And of that, 75% of that amount of money goes to pay for 3 departments. They pay for the sheriff, they pay for the jail, and they pay for the 911 communication systems. And those are important systems, and it's important that we retain them. And yet, at the same time, when we want to cut the budget, we look at what are the things farthest from us that we can cut with the least amount of pain. And our county commissioners made a decision 3 years ago to cut all funding to all economic and community development programs. That was over $200,000, and that cut out some services that were Meals on Wheels from the elderly. It cut out hospice home care visits from volunteers from Androscoggin Home Health. It impacted transportation from Western Maine Transportation. It forced Western Maine Community Action to not go out to local communities to serve the elderly, but make them come to their offices in East Wilton. It had huge economic impacts. How much did that impact me as a taxpayer? That saved me $5. I questioned, how much did it save TransCanada? I don't know if you know about TransCanada. They're a corporation out of Canada that put one of the biggest windmill operations ever in the United States, invested over $250 million, and they're a taxpayer. How much did it save them? Now, I agree that we have to be very, very sensitive to where we spend our taxes, but we also have to look at the data. Where do our taxes come from, and who do we want to invest in? I'm quite sure that we need to invest in our elderly, and we have to help them be as independent as possible for as long as possible in our community. And we think that working with them and sharing resources that we have in our community, as well as engaging government in our community, that we probably can make a larger impact in ensuring they're healthy. And maybe there's even some economic opportunity that we can create for youth to come back. How do we invest in broadband so we make sure that we've got the best broadband in the state of Maine? It is going to take an investment, and it's one we ought to carefully consider, because we need to make that investment probably more than any other county because of the way our economy is. Very fortunate for us in county government that 2/3 of our tax base is north strong. It's in towns like Carrabassett Valley, it's in the unorganized territory, it's in Rangeley area. It's because a lot of people have built vacation homes up there, and they aren't residents, but they're willing to pay.
Thanks, but can we just press pause and get to the questioning portion? Sam, you wanna?
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. So thank you, Mr. Fowler. We are going to move on to the first question of the night. This was submitted by a community member. We would like to remind the candidates to please try to keep their answers short and under 2 minutes, just because there is a number of you and we don't have that much time. So the first question is, politics appear to be overtly partisan these days, with little compromise and lots of negative ads and attacks. What is your plan to achieve results for Maine by working across the aisle to find compromise and solutions to help everyday Mainers. And we'll start with Jan Collins, who is running for Senate.
Thank you, Sam. This is Jan. And thanks everybody for listening. There is only one way to bridge the partisan gap, and that is by listening. And it isn't listening with a response, it's listening and understanding. All of us come to whatever decision we've made by looking a series of things, looking at our own values and also looking at the facts. At least we hope we're looking at the facts. My decision making is data-based. That means I look at all the information I can find, all the statistics, and I make my decisions based on those statistics. It is my hope that that's what we all do, and that we do that in the best interest of those people that we serve. So listening is what I do really well. I love talking with people and listening to them and recording their concerns and then acting on them. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Christina Riley.
Sorry about that. I think working across the aisle is just what you do. You have to. When I was in my first term, we had the arrearage management program come up for a renewal. That was a program that was put in place before I got there that helps people who have fallen behind on their energy bills, their electricity bills, get a break so that they can get their feet back under them. And when it hit our committee, I thought we were just going to end up deep sixing it because the numbers didn't look real great, and there were some concerns about it. And I got talking in, over a cup of coffee, we happened to end up in the same place at the same time, and I got talking with one of the most conservative members of my committee, and she and I mulled that over and came up with some ideas together, and we tweaked the bill and got some other agencies involved in it and came out with what we both felt was a real win for everybody involved. And it got through our committee. It was looking like it was going to die, and instead it went through the committee with a unanimous vote and was signed into law. I think we overrode Governor LePage's veto. Wasn't quite unanimous, but it was a very strong override. And got it signed into law, and then we just re-upped it again. And she came back to my committee, this representative who no longer sits on the committee, to make sure that people knew that we were still working together and that it was still a good idea and that we still needed to move forward, and so we did. So I think that you forge those relationships based on trust, and as long as the people that you're working with are honest and respectful, there is absolutely nothing that you can't get done. Where it breaks down is when people decide that it's okay to be dishonest and to ignore the rules and to be rude to one another, and then government doesn't work. So I think we really need to make sure that it does, because that's why we're there.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Thomas Schofield.
Thank you. That is a good question. I think one of the things that we're fortunate in Maine is that our legislators and our state senators, by and large, get along with each other. And the partisanship in Augusta is probably less than folks realize. By and large, we get along really well. I get along with Tina. We're in opposite parties, but I get along with Tina, for instance. And I have found out that if it's a good idea and it works for the people, that no matter who comes up with the idea, there are people down there on opposite sides of the aisle who will weigh in on it and who will be part of that. One of my favorite presidents, probably my favorite president, Ronald Reagan, said, "You can get an awful lot done if you don't care who gets the credit for it." And I think we do that quite well in Augusta. Not perfectly, not all the time. I think my Democrat colleagues will say that a few knuckleheads on the Republican side, and I think they'll agree there's a few knuckleheads on the Democrat side who are very partisan. But by and large, those numbers are very, very small, and we get along quite well. And working across the aisle, working with other people, keeping an open mind. Jan said it, Tina said it. You've got to keep an open mind, and you've got to listen and listen to other people's voices, listen to other people's thoughts. Even if you don't agree, you stick to your principles and you stick to your values, but you need to take other people's thoughts into consideration. When you represent 9,000 people like we do, you represent everyone, not just the ones you agree with. You represent all. And that's something we need to always keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Peter Bourgeois.
It's a good question. I forgot to mention in my opening statement that I've served on the Phillips Planning Board for 5 years now, and I've been the chairman of that board for a year. And there are Democrats and Republicans on that board, and in my time on that board, I have always done my best to balance the concern for economic development in Phillips with the environmental consequences in some cases of that development, which are no small matter when we're talking about gravel pits, for example, which is a huge part of the economic life of this town. And yeah, I have worked with folks of all political persuasions in order to balance those interests and to come to a consensus about what we believe is right for the town. And I think my record will show that. And you don't even have to go into my record here in Phillips. You can look at the no CMP corridor site. I've been very public in my opposition to the CMP corridor. And if you look at the list of other candidates who have opposed the corridor, there's Democrats, there's Republicans, there's independents. Some of the Republicans who come to mind are Richard Bennett, Paul Davis, and Senator Russell Black, who I totally agree with. We should not make Maine an extension cord for Massachusetts. So from my own record of service at the municipal level to the positions that I'm taking here as a candidate, I think you can see that I'm perfectly willing to work with anyone, regardless of the letter after their name, to do what's right for the people of House District 112. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Scott Landry.
It is a great question. I referred to it in my opening statement. You have to get along with people. You have to know how people think on the other side of the aisle. I live in a purple community. It's a great place to live. I've been endorsed by a wide variety of organizations, Equality Maine, Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine, the Maine Education Association, the NRA, Maine Conservation Voters, the Maine Realtors Voters Association, because they know that I can work on both sides. We were in session one night till 6 o'clock in the morning. It was about 3 in the morning and I was on the other side of the aisle. I might have been talking with Representative Schofield at that time when a gentleman from Portland, a Democrat, came up to me and said, well, we want to thank the Republicans for letting us use you a little bit this session. I can work with other people, and you have to work because you have to hear both sides of the issue. If you don't, you're lost. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're going to move on to Stefan Bunker.
Thank you for that. I couldn't help but agree with the other presenters here. I found in all my years on the selections, I work with Maine Municipal Association and many other organizations that I'm in. It's all about building relationships and gaining the confidence and respect of people, regardless of their political persuasion, and being a good listener too. And knowing that there's things you can always learn about somebody else's point of view to perhaps carry you perhaps a little bit closer to the center. And I've never considered compromise being a dirty word itself. Certainly not, particularly if it helps break the ice dam, if you will, as long as you're not violating or letting go of some of your core principles. And the person who got me involved in the Board of Select Persons, he gave me a simple reminder that I've carried with me when I'm thinking about critical votes and where it sits with other people, that doing the popular thing isn't always right, but doing the right thing isn't always popular either. And I will stake my claim to positions that I'll have in front of the legislature with what is best for the folks in my particular district. And I'll take my lickings from partisan groups if I have to, but I'll remember who sent me home, who sent me there to the legislature, and who I come back home to. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Greg Kimber.
Okay. Yeah, I would probably echo a lot of what we've heard already. I just think it's important to, you know, we all have kind of our perspective on things. It's important to get other people's perspectives that are coming from a different angle. And I think the more different angles you look at, the better your decisions are going to be. So that's important. And I know, you know, when I've gone down to Augusta to speak with my representatives, you know, I've always had a good time. You know, they listen to me. A lot of times they don't vote the way I might want them to, but you know, we have good discussions, and I feel like there's a good back and forth. So I do appreciate that about the what we have down in Augusta.
Thank you. And we will move on to Savannah Sessions.
Thanks. So I, again, echo a lot of what other people have said. I think real progress happens when it's based in relationships and listening and trying to understand each other. As a teacher, I often point out root words to my students, and I think dialogue is a great example because built into the word is dia, meaning across. So we have to talk with each other and listen to each other. And there is room for debate. And I was on my high school debate team. Learning to argue the opposite point is a really valuable life skill. And I think we can all learn a lot from exploring the other side, and talking with our colleagues across the aisle is a great way to do that.
Alrighty, thank you. And we're going to move on to a different question. This one is from a UMF student, and it says, I'm worried about the constitutional crisis and the peaceful transfer of power if President Trump loses. I want to know what our elected Maine officials, especially our sheriff, would do if local pro-Trump supporters refuse to accept Donald John Trump's loss. And I'm going to call on Scott Nichols to answer that.
Well, hi there. So regardless of who wins or who loses and who supports whom, it really is no concern of mine. People may have a hissy fit, people may get upset. That's fine, they have the First Amendment right to do so. However, if they start committing crimes while they're having their hissy fit, then they are going to have a problem. So, you know, everybody has the right to free speech. Everybody has a right to express themselves on social media, whatever they want to do. But as long as they're doing it without committing a crime, I'm okay with it. They commit a crime, then they're going to have to deal with the consequences. It's pretty simple.
All right, thank you. And next would be Edward Hastings.
Thank you very much for the question. I have already said in a previous video that I support people's rights to peacefully protest in our community, whether it's over president or other issues that they feel are important. One of the things that I really want to do as sheriff is make sure that we're building relationships in our community so that we can have a direct communication with the organizers of these events, because certainly as things begin to get a little heated, it helps when you have contact with the people that are organizing the events to try to steer the crowd or the movement in a positive direction. Certainly, I will uphold the law and make sure that people are not damaging property. And again, I've also said in other campaign videos that we're very fortunate to live in the area where we do. People have come out and protested different topics. They've always been peaceful, and we can thank our community members for that. So thank you very much for that question.
Alrighty, thank you. And we're going to move on to another question from the community. And this one is, Given the huge estimated financial impact of the COVID virus upon our state, creating a multi-million-dollar estimated shortfall in the anticipated revenues for the next biennium, what would you do in response? And I'm going to start with County Commissioner District 1, Terrence Brand.
Hello? First you need, am I there?
Yes, you are.
Okay. First, we need to pay attention to the closing of the mill if it does happen down in Jay. We've been watching that for some years now, and it doesn't look good. So we've been planning, we have a plan in place to reduce some of the budget items. And we've done that for the last several years. And I know some people don't like that, but it was necessary to pay back. And we do still have a debt, unfunded liability that we inherited from the previous administration at the commissioners. And we've paid down $200,000 on that in the last couple of years. We have $300,000 left to pay down. So we're really in a tight budget in the county, and we need to curtail spending as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Tiffany Marui.
Thanks, Sam, for the question. So I am for raising added revenues, but not on the backs of Franklin County taxpayers, nor on the backs of taxpayers of the state of Maine. I think that we need to be innovative. We need to listen. We need to find problems, solutions to the problems that are put in front of us. We need more diverse jobs, sets, skills. Local broadband would be able to put more jobs at the fingertips of people coming into the economy and those that are currently here. I also would look at, as I said, outside funding sources. I'll give an example of innovation is during COVID-19, when presented with a problem, you reach across the aisle and you work with others to solve these solutions. So in short, our tax rate, we can stay steady on our tax rate. We don't have to look to just curtail. We just need to be innovative and listen to people. I'm not the smartest person in the room. We need to listen to all the ideas and come up with the solution together.
Perfect, thank you. And then we'll move on to Lance Harville.
Thank you very much. Like I mentioned before, whether or not the mill closes, there's already a serious reevaluation because of the damage that was done. And with basically from the wood room in through the pulp mill to the paper machines is no longer in use. So that's certainly going to drop in terms of revenue. Having served in the legislature through the 08-09 downturn, which was nowhere near this significant, I can tell you that there is nearly no way that you're not going to see curtailments to the cost of education. You're going to see revenue sharing cuts because there's only a few places in Augusta where you can really get serious money. Now, all of this somewhat depends in the short term, whether or not the federal government weighs in with how much stimulus relief they provide or not. That would mitigate the damages, but almost surely it won't be the full 1.4 billion. And it will be probably along the lines more of a one-time infusion. And how you pay that's very important. I worry quite a lot about the hospitals. One of the ways that the legislature historically for years had held the cost and cut costs was to basically not pay their hospital bills, so much so that we were left with about $500 million in payments that we owed the hospitals. We were able to, the LePage administration was able to sell the liquor contract. That doesn't come up every year to cover that cost. That's probably not going to be there. So I worry if they're going to dip into that again. But at the local level, the idea that, I really like the idea if we could hand the bill to somebody else that's not in the local area, but seeing 90% of our tax base comes from the local taxpayers of Franklin County, I don't really see how that's possible. So it's going to take some really hard decisions. Like I said, there is one advantage and one place where you could go potentially for some serious investment, and that's to strengthen broadband. But other than that, I think, one of the things that happens in everybody's personal life and or government too, when times that hard hit, you really are forced to make tough decisions. And I've been making tough decisions for 10 years. They don't scare me. I can explain them to people, and that's where I am.
Perfect, thank you. And Fenwick Fowler, sorry.
I hate to be the skunk at the party, but I don't think you can cut your way to prosperity. And I believe that honestly, we're going to have to look at who are the ones that are hurting the most, who are the ones that were employed but are now not employed, and how do we get them employed? And where do we need to make our investments to do that? And I do think that when I look at what I paid in county taxes 10 years ago and what I paid today, I pay $1 less than what I paid 10 years ago. And I think that there's a little bit of room to move in taxation. And I don't think we ought to be, as leaders, we ought to be afraid to say that we need to look at maybe different ways of taxation than we have in the past. But I do think the public has to make an investment. That's why we're asking our Congress to make an investment. It's our tax dollars. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you. The next question comes from a UMF student. I would love to hear more about the protections you would plan to put in place to keep LGBTQIA plus people in Maine, especially how we are seeing more younger people start to identify within that community. And I'm going to start with Jan Collins.
Thanks for that question. So there are lots of issues wrapped up in this because we know that the current person who's being interviewed for the position of the Supreme Court of the United States is anti-LGBTQ rights and has even spoken about reversing marriage equality. So there's a deep concern about that potential. However, Maine was ahead of the Supreme Court in making marriage equality a possibility in Maine. In fact, ensuring that it was a possibility in Maine. Maine has been ahead of the game in most cases in terms of LGBTQ rights. The thing that remains an issue is the stigma within the community. We know that people with who identify as LGBTQ often have are more likely to have mental health issues because of the stigma attached to their identification. We also know that they are overrepresented in youth criminal justice. In other words, there's more percentage-wise at Long Creek, which is the juvenile justice facility here in Maine. So we still have a long way to go. The way we do that is by having open minds and making sure that the law guarantees equality for all people, no matter how they identify, and that the majority does not take away the rights of the minorities. Thank you.
Next, we'll move on to Christina Riley.
There we go. Sorry about the delay on that. I'm still not real quick on my swap over to unmute. This is an issue that I think affects society as a whole and not just the people who are directly impacted by it. I think it says a lot about who we are as a people. And the forward progress that we've made in the past term or two in the legislature have been particularly like getting rid of banning state licensed therapists from using conversion therapy on minors. It was a huge step forward. And I realize that for a lot of the people who were opposed to that, they just don't see the harm. But people who have survived those kinds of attempts to make them all better tell us that it makes them much worse. So I think that regardless of the experiences I have in my own life, making sure that people who don't have any voice get somebody to speak up for them. And in this case, it was children. We've also, I mean, before my time was the whole marriage equality thing. Maine has been out in front on that. And I think that it bodes well for us here in Maine that even if our fundamental rights are being eroded at the federal level, we can still ensure that people have adequate protection here in the state of Maine. We have more steps we need to take to make sure that people are treated fairly in housing and in jobs and those sorts of things, regardless of whatever their personal differences in life may be. But I think that what's happening right now at the federal level makes it very clear that these are things that we need to push forward at the state level, even if it seems like those protections are already in place, because they can so easily get taken away from us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Thomas Skolkfield.
Thank you. I believe that everyone should be protected under the law, regardless of their lifestyle, their race, their color, their creed. We need to protect everyone. Everyone should have a voice. Everyone should be heard. Everyone should be recognized. And no one should be left behind in our society. And I do believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. That's my personal belief. The law in Maine has countered that, and I uphold the law. And I will accept the law. But it seems to me that we need to be careful that we don't give some people more rights than others. And we need to be careful that there are unintended consequences, and we need to make sure that everyone is protected regardless, as I said before, regardless of where they're coming from. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Peter Bourgeois.
I am a straight ally. I have a niece who is an open lesbian and happily partnered. I'm endorsed by Equality Maine, and I believe that everyone should be treated equally regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. My opponent, however, voted against the ban on gay conversion therapy, which is a pseudoscientific process that does no good and all harm. And I think that he can talk all he wants about how people should be treated equally in society. But when you vote against a ban on a procedure like that, you are telling every LGBTQ+ person in this state that they are not an everyday Mainer like everybody else. They have a mental disorder. That's what you're saying. And, you know, I will absolutely support the rights of LGBTQ+ people in Maine. I think that we do have a problem with veterans benefits in this state. There are several benefits who are discharged when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was in place. And while a lot of their benefits are more a federal level matter than in the state, there are some things that we can do to get those veterans the benefits that they have earned through their service. I'm also interested, as Jan hinted at, I don't want to mischaracterize her position, but my position is that we should do our best to close Long Creek and replace it with community-based programs, in part because LGBTQ people are overrepresented in the population of that facility. And I would also support looking at the way we teach sex ed in this country to make it more LGBTQ inclusive as well as age appropriate, to show that, again, LGBTQ people are normal of this society just like everyone else.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Scott Landry.
Thank you. All people should be treated equally, whether you're black, you're white, you're gay, you're lesbian, transgender. Everybody deserves the same rights. Growing up, I was small and I was picked on by bullies. And we have to watch out for the bullies who pick on people, no matter what creed or sexual identity they have. People need to be treated right, and I will always support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Stefan Bunker.
Thank you. I don't want to try to oversimplify what can be a very complicated and drawn out question, but I'll get right to the point. I'm a life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness person. Equality is what I would want extended to my extended family. In my many years in the military, one of the reasons that I enjoyed being an officer in the Coast Guard, we were probably one of the most diverse military populations there. And the ability to advance based on your knowledge, skills, and abilities set ourselves high above many other branches of the service. And I'd lead by an example on that from what positions that I'm in public life for hiring, supervision, training, discipline, requiring a quick response to complaints that they can be resolved in a timely fashion. I've got no room for hate or bias based on any of the criteria that we've discussed, but continue to trouble us as a society. So somebody's got an issue with these, bring it to me. I'll step up with you because I'm a constitutionalist kind of guy. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Greg Kimber.
Well, again, I want to echo a lot of what's been said already, especially what Jan was saying and Tina. I'm a strong supporter of marriage equality, and really glad about getting rid of conversion therapy. Unfortunately, here in District 114, the rep voted against that ban, which I was disappointed to see. And I'm also endorsed by Equality Maine. I'm just an absolute ally and supporter of LGBTQ rights. So thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll move on to Savannah Sessions.
Yeah, thanks. Like Greg, a lot of what Jan and Tina said really resonated for me. When I was in high school, there was a hate crime against an LGBTQ person, and that started the civil rights team at my high school at Oxford Hills. And we kind of set the bar for what civil rights teams in the state of Maine were set out to do. And that program has continued on, and it's still really strong. In my previous job, I led our civil rights team. I agree all Americans are entitled to equal protection under the law, and sometimes that means explicit protections until the culture of understanding about different identities becomes the norm. So I would love to see a change at places like Long Creek and support all of our LGBTQ plus citizens of Maine, and especially young people.
Alrighty, thank you. We're going to move on to another question, and that is events and this is from a UMF community. I mean, not a UMF, a Farmington community member. Events in recent months have highlighted widespread problems with police bias and abuse. What have you done, and what more do you think you can do to ensure that your officers are not unwittingly acting out of racial bias? And we're going to have Scott Nichols start us off with that one.
Yeah, thank you for the question. All our officers undergo training at the academy that talks about implicit bias. That's one of the things they really concentrate on. We also receive the same type of training on an annual basis when it comes up by the state. It requires us to take this training. And quite frankly, at the sheriff's office, it's just not an issue. My guys and gals work with gay people, black people, yellow people. I mean, you name it. We work with everybody, and it's just not an issue at all. Again, we've never had a complaint. It's just we don't even think about it because it's just not an issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we'll move on to Edward Hastings.
Thank you very much for the question. I would too echo the same. that we do receive training through Justice Academy on implicit and ongoing training as new develops. Thing that we participate with in Farmington is the crisis intervention training and the basically trying to focus on what we can do to work with our community members, regardless of race or anything. And something that I personally try to do is be an example supervisor and role model for our officers in our behavior, and try to make sure that we're supportive of everyone regardless. And I would echo the same, that we don't have constant complaints of any issues with our people on that level, but it's really, really important to me as a leader that we show positive leadership and that our actions echo those same things for all matters, both politically as well. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. And we're gonna go on to the final question for those running for county commissioner office. Would you support or oppose a ban on corporate contributions to candidates and PAC's political action campaigns? And we'll start that off with Terrence Brown.
I really didn't hear the question.
Apologies. So would you support or oppose a ban on corporate contributions to candidates and PACs, which are political action campaigns?
I think that's a political question for sure, but I think everybody has a choice to make. If I want to donate $200 or $300 to a candidate, I ought to be able to do that. I'm not a corporation or a company, but if I had a company, small business, and I wanted to donate to somebody, I have no issues with that.
Thank you. Next, we'll go on to Tiffany Marui.
Thank you. So I support a ban on corporate contributions to candidates and PACs. As a Franklin County Commissioner candidate, we're not allowed to accept them. We're individually financed. And honestly, there is way too much money in politics. I agree that individuals should be able to donate, and I would like to see that there be a cap on the amount that goes into elections. We spend far too much money on political advertising. When we think of all the money that's spent that we could put towards the betterment of our community. So in short, yes, absolutely. I support a ban on corporate contributions to candidates and PACs.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Lance Harville.
Well, regardless of what I think about that one way or the other, the Supreme Court has ruled on it. So until the Supreme Court, you either amend the Constitution or there's another Supreme Court ruling, any ban that, which you couldn't even do with the county commissioners anyway, would be a redundant point. As to corporate money for myself, I don't take any corporate money. Running for office before, I used the same signs I had then because I don't like throwing away and wasting things. And until you deal with the issue that the Supreme Court has done, which is much more of a Washington issue, there's not much you could do about that locally. In fact, when I was in the legislature, they used to have something called matching funds with the Maine Clean Election Act, where if a PAC spent money on your opponent and you're both clean elections, there would be a match come from clean elections. And because of the Supreme Court decision, even the state had to do away with that law. So I'm unaware of your ability to pass any law that hasn't been dealt with by the court.
Thank you. And next we'll move on to Fenwick Fowler.
I am opposed. Yeah,
Do you mind speaking up a little? It's just a little difficult to hear you.
I am opposed to corporations or PACs funding any candidates. And yet it doesn't impact the county commissioners because they can't receive monies from those. Thank you.
Alrighty, perfect. Thank you. We are going to move on to our concluding remarks for the candidates. Just a reminder to please just keep it short and under 2 minutes. And we will start with Jen Collins. Jan, I think you're muted.
Oops. In my concluding remarks, I would just like to point out the differences between myself and my opponent. One, I support and will be on a broadband committee for my town, and my opponent voted against the bond issue that would have funded services to rural Maine. I support the increases that we've had in the minimum wage, and my opponent voted against all the minimum wage increases, and he voted to weaken its implementation. I support fair taxation for all. My opponent voted to cut taxes for the wealthiest Mainers, shifting the tax burden to middle income Mainers 3 times in the last 10 years. I support an increase in the municipal revenue sharing to the state mandate of 5%. My opponent voted to cut those revenue sharing costs, revenue sharing returns to the municipalities, which cost Franklin County over $10 million. One reason why our taxes went up during that period. I support funding the state of Maine's legal obligation to provide 55% of education funding, and my opponent voted to shift the cost of funding teachers' pensions from state to local taxpayers, raising local taxpayers' property taxes once again. I support fairness. I support this Equal Rights Amendment banning discrimination against women. My opponent voted against it. I support fair elections. I do not accept lobbyist funds. My opponent does accept lobbyist funds. I support marriage equality. My opponent opposed it. I support a ban on conversion therapy, and my opponent opposed the ban. I support a permanent commission on racial, indigenous, and tribal populations, and my opponent opposed that commission. I think there's a clear difference between myself and my opponent. I hope that, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Christina Riley.
I can't start the video. Hold on. There we go. Didn't want to start. Sorry about the delay. Thank you. Thank you for putting this forum together, and for moderating, and for thank you to everybody who worked behind the scenes to make it happen. I know it wasn't a simple effort, that's for sure. I really feel very strongly that a lot of the issues that have been brought forward tonight around broadband and shifting of the tax burden onto property taxes, needing to relieve that. Those are very, very important issues to the people that I talk to every day. They're really worried about having good schools, but they're also really worried that too much of the funding is coming from the local level, and it's not sustainable. When people talk about how much money we're spending at the state level right now, I think that one of the things they don't see in that increase that when they talk about how Janet's budget was too high and all, that a lot of the money that we spent was spent on property tax relief. We sent out checks for $104 to all the property tax payers around the state of Maine. That was a huge state expenditure, but it was required, and those kinds of things get factored in as spending, even though what it's actually doing is giving money back to taxpayers. I think it's really important to keep that in mind. We also increased municipal revenue sharing, and we increased the education match, and we also expanded Medicare, MaineCare, which means that a whole lot of people who didn't have health insurance before now have that. And that's not only good for those people, it's very good for our rural hospitals, who get paid a little bit better when they're getting at least a Medicaid reimbursement, as opposed to having to give charity care to people who can't otherwise pay for it. And those people who got that Medicaid expansion, that's 70,000 or so people, are the working poor. These are not people who are sitting around waiting for a handout. These are people who are working at jobs where they cannot buy into the health insurance from their employers. So I think it's really important to look at what Democrats are doing is not just spending money, but also investing money back into the communities where that support is most needed. And that's what I've been working on. That's the kind of fiscal behavior I support, and that's what I'll be doing in Augusta. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Thomas Schofield.
Thank you once again for putting this on this evening. It's been very, very interesting. And I think the folks who are listening in have got quite a bit out of it. And I'm a 7th generation Mainer. I've lived here all my life. I know the folks in Franklin County. I am hoping to serve my 4th term in the Maine State Legislature. I'd like to be at the 130th legislature this January. I had a 45-year career with the Department of Conservation. I was a conservation officer, and I've dealt with people. I know how to work with folks. I protected a resource. I was a steward of our resources. And that's why it's important that I'm on the Agriculture, Conservation, Forestry Committee. If I re-elected, I intend to go back there if I can. I believe that environment and natural resources is something that is strongly important to our area. And I support broadband. I was one of the ones who voted for it in my caucus. And I also supported Land for Maine Futures. I believe those are 2 things that we need to keep on the front burners in our state: broadband and Land for Maine Futures. And I'm a clean elections candidate. I believe in the clean elections process. I think that it's a good process. It keeps money out of the process as much as possible. It's taxpayer funded, but I think it's well worth the process. And also, I am endorsed by the National Rifle Association, the Gun Owners of Maine, and I'm a strong Second Amendment supporter. I believe in the Second Amendment. And so many will say they are until they get down and start to vote, and then you can see that their support of the Second Amendment is not quite what it was. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Peter Bourgeois.
Well, as I said in my opening statement, I was 3 years old before I first set foot in the state of Maine, but I've lived in Maine since 1993, and I've lived in Phillips since 2007. I know what a whole variety of environmental and natural resource issues look like at the municipal level from my service on the Phillips Planning Board. I've been a volunteer bookkeeper at the Phillips Farmers Market since, oh man, how long have I been doing it? 8, 9 years? I think that's about right. So anything to support local organic agriculture will always be an important thing in my book. We've talked a lot about infrastructure when my time has come around here, but I'm just as equally interested in serving on the Agriculture and Environment and Natural Resources committees. I'm also a clean elections candidate, and I'm proud to be a clean elections candidate, and I will never support any legislation that would weaken the Clean Election Act. I'm endorsed by, Equality Maine, as I said, Maine AFL-CIO, SEIU. I think that my platform, and I think they endorse me because they show that my platform is about standing up for the people of Maine, working people of Maine. And that's why I made a consumer-owned utility a cornerstone of my platform. I think it can create a lot of good green energy jobs that we need in this area, especially in the wake of the economic impact of this pandemic. And it opens up a lot of opportunities for broadband. And I want to add as well that as proposed, the Maine Power Delivery Authority, which would be the consumer-owned utility entity created by the legislation that would be required, would be a consumer-owned utility. Any debt that it takes on would not be considered debt owed by the state government. That means it can borrow against future revenues. And so this transition will not take taxes or bonds. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Scott Landry.
Again, I want to thank you folks very much for putting this together. It's good to see all my friends on the other side of the screen here. Broadband keeps coming up. Everybody is mentioning broadband. Listening to the quality of the sound and some of the video that we're getting tonight, we've got a real problem with broadband. I've always been a big supporter. It's going to be a challenge. The schools need it. Telemedicine is very important. it's going to be a long, interesting winter. We're going to have to find some efficiencies. We can't be taxing the people as heavily as we are. I think with expanding broadband, making an investment there will help increase the tax base, bring in small entrepreneurs to help us grow little businesses. We're not going to get any more shoe shops or woolen mills like we had when I was a kid. We've got to keep people working. Healthcare is very important. The hospitals, their charity care has doubled in the past 10 years. That system is broken. We've got to help the people. We've got to give them broadband. We've got to help them afford health insurance and guarantee the rights of all people to be who they are. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Stefan Bunker.
Thanks to the organizations who brought this presentation to us this evening. Well done, particularly tough in COVID circumstances where we don't have many public gatherings to get in face to face on this. I didn't mention in my orientation, I'm a product of Maine's higher education system. Having been through Southern Maine Community College, USM, and Orono for my graduate work. If anybody wants to ask me what do I support, it's going to be higher education. It's the helping hand up. That's the reason that I'm where I am here. I'm also very focused on additional funding for the Voc Tech types of programs that I see here in Farmington. When's the last time you called for a plumber, an electrician, a carpenter, a welder, or whatnot? Small businesses are crying for those kinds of folks, and those are the kinds of skills that we could train young people that they would stay in Maine, live in Maine, work in Maine here. So that would be one focus that I would have. I'm going to be a constant barb if I get a chance to remind Augusta, much like Jan was mentioning, their long promises on revenue sharing, local school funding. Sure, they made some steps in that right direction, but far short of what they've been, and it's cost Franklin County and its towns millions, and that puts the burden right on the property taxpayers who are property poor in those situations, particularly with fixed incomes and older Americans. State government's got to step up. And speaking of state government, I've spent 25 years there, and I've been a state bureaucrat. I know how government works, and I know. This is an old-time saying, government has a natural tendency to grow bigger, and when it grows bigger, liberty shrinks. And I will be a reminder to try to keep government mean and lean, keeping them focused on what are the priorities and make very tough decisions on needs versus wants, and looking those that are at a greater risk here. And whatever I would do, I would never support any legislation that increased expenses to small businesses or private citizens in their communities. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Greg Kimber.
First of all, thank you for putting this together. Thanks. It was great to hear from all my fellow candidates, and thanks for everyone listening in. In closing, to everybody listening in, I just want to say thank you for taking the time and interest to really find out about your candidates. And I would encourage everyone, that's how you, be an informed voter, really research what votes people have taken and where they stand on the issues. So actually, I think I'm going to take advantage of the chat box and paste in a couple links to places where you can find, voting records for some of our sitting representatives. I'm not one of them, so you can't look at my record, but you can check out my website. Take a look at my endorsements, and I'll also post in a couple links to flesh out some of the issues that I brought up in my intro. So I'll throw that in there, and thanks everyone for taking the time to do this.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Savannah Sessions.
Thank you. First of all, maybe just extending on what Greg just said, and I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but the most important thing that we can all do is get out and vote and make sure our friends are getting out and voting. and exercising that most important of our civic duties. So please go vote, be safe, and vote in a way that works for you. I'm really looking forward to being an active voice in Augusta, to being present, to introducing and working on legislation that really benefits those of us who live out here in Franklin and Oxford counties. And I'm excited to get to Augusta and get to work because we have a big job ahead of us. You know, studies show that states that invest in themselves during these difficult times rather than trying to save money actually recover faster than states that just put money in reserve. So I want to work with my colleagues across the aisle with and hear from all kinds of Mainers, because my district is really spread out and what's going on in Stowe may not be what's going on in Eustis. So it's really important to me to always hear from people from all areas of the district and yeah, work on broadband, work on healthcare, making sure that our rural hospitals and health centers are supported, and you know, taking care of the people who live, work, play, and enjoy life out in Western Maine. So thank you again for putting this forum on. Thanks for everyone who participated, whether you were listening or a candidate. It was really, I learned a lot tonight. So thanks.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Scott Nichols.
Thank you. You know, 8 years ago, we brought the sheriff's office from a 1970s model into the 21st century. We also returned the jail into a full-time operation, which meant that local families and attorneys didn't have to travel to Skowhegan anymore to see the incarcerated loved ones. Bringing the jail back also allowed us the situation we enjoy today by bringing revenue into the county, much needed revenue through the jail. In the future, the challenges that we have specifically is the opioid crisis. We are working with local groups within Franklin County to help battle the addiction of opioids. We will continue to provide the best possible service, always keeping the budget in mind. And I look forward as your sheriff and ask you for your support November 3rd. And I must say, I really enjoyed seeing everybody here tonight. Most of you I've worked with over the years, particularly when it came to budget issues with the jail. And I do, regardless of what political persuasion you are, the people in Franklin County are wonderful. We work as a team together. I've never had an issue with anybody. And it just makes my heart joyful to see you all here today. And I just appreciate the time you've given me to talk to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Edward Hastings.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you all for organizing this. Folks, I want you all to know that I am not a one-term candidate and that my vision extends beyond this term and next, and for as long as the citizens of Franklin County entrust me in their role as sheriff. I'm here to make a difference and improve the community for my children and your children too. In this campaign, I have not only tried to share my vision, but also demonstrate my desire to be the next Franklin County Sheriff and to do it to the very best of my ability. I have garnered support, placed signs, written articles, made videos, sent mailers, answered questions, put messages on the radio, and have spoke with hundreds of people as I have been working at this campaign. This experience has brought me vastly out of my comfort zone. However, when I make a commitment to something, I am all in. I want folks to really know that I'm truly in this. I'm in this for the long haul. And folks, everyone that was here with us tonight, thank you all for joining us. To those that will watch these videos in the future, thank you very much for becoming informed. And to the hosts, again, thank you for putting together the questions and the format. I know that it was a lot of work. And everyone watching, please make sure you go and vote. Your vote is very, very important. And I still am convincing people of that too during this process. So again, thank you all.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Terrence Braun. Mr. Brown, are you still on the call?
Yes?
Oh, okay, we can.
Am I there?
Yes. we
Am I
can-
there?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to read something off of my palm card that one of the budget committee members wrote. It's amazing to have a county commissioner who actually listens and is willing to work with the budget committee. And that's what we strive to do when I became a commissioner 4 years ago, is to work with the people that's necessary to come up with a sound budget and not increase taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we'll move on to Tiffany Marie.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks everybody that coordinated this. I think it's a great forum. I would say that I have specifically 5 goals here. I'd like to explore a charter commission. I think there's too much power concentrated in a 3-person board of commissioners. I would not look towards increasing the budget. Instead, the current commissioners have $12,000 apiece. Instead, I would look towards how we could reorganize it to better representation for 5 at $6,000 apiece. I think $12,000 apiece for a Franklin County Commissioner is much too much. I'd like to also increase public access to the commissioners while increasing accountability to municipal government. Right now, the county commissioners meet during the weekdays and during work slots. I think that they should work, that the county commissioners should have district-wide meetings. They should also be accountable to the citizens, municipal governments by publishing an annual report. I also believe that they should work collaboratively to better serve the public health and infrastructure, the needs of citizens of Franklin County, and protect the citizens from the public health threats. And looking at, again, we've said many times before, but broadband, working with Greater Franklin Development Council to expand broadband into the rural parts of Maine. And I also think that it's very important that they value, encourage, and invest in social and economic programs to further empower the people and small businesses of Franklin County. And about 30 years ago, we centralized the funding of social and economic programs to be at the county level. It was fair, equitable, and through the budget process, the budget committee is supposed to have the last say through a 2/3 vote. And historically, the current commissioners have not adhered nor honored that vote when it doesn't align with their own personal beliefs. And I would ensure that Franklin County gets a share of its state tax dollars and impact for every tax dollar spent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next we'll move on to Lance Harvell.
Thank you very much. Just before we go, is it possible to get a link for this? I teach social studies at the Phillips School, and I'm thinking of maybe using this as a forum thing for a class, but that's another subject. On that subject, I'm first and foremost an historian. That's what I've always been. And there used to be a phrase in the 19th and 20th centuries that, you know, that it was, you were proud to be a good steward of taxpayers' money. And that's something that I've always tried to pride myself on. I've always tried to pride myself on being direct. I don't make a lot of promises right up front because I much rather deliver, under promise and over deliver than I ever had to over promise and under deliver. And if somebody, when you listen to campaign after campaign after campaign, and I've been doing this for 20 years, the palm cards all say the same thing. They all, you know, but it's a question of how we deliver it. And to me, you know, if I sit there and tell you I can walk on water, you better make sure it's not February outside when I'm making the promise. And there's been a lot of February talk here tonight. You know what? There's a limited amount of resources. There's tough decisions that have to be made. And I would be I'm going to be a steward of the taxpayers' money first and foremost.
Thank you. And to answer your question, this is being recorded, so we can definitely send you a link to it later on. Last but not least, Fenwick Fowler.
Very much for holding this forum. None of us are as smart as all of us together. And I really appreciate that not only 14 candidates showed up, but over 30 citizens showed up to listen, because that's important. And I learned a great deal, and I appreciate what I learned. Going forward, I strongly believe that we need to invest in our population. And if we're ever asking ourselves, how can we do this without paying more taxes? I would like us to go back 3 years. What did we pay in taxes 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and last year? Last year, I paid 15% less in taxes, in my property taxes, my county taxes, my local taxes, my state income tax, and my federal tax. And it wasn't just because my income went down. It was because we had tax breaks. And we might have to reinvest. We might have to raise some different taxes in order to reinvest, but I really hope we do reinvest, because our population is what is greatest in need in reviving from COVID-19. So thank you all for listening, and I look forward to continued dialogue as we move forward to these challenges.
Alrighty, thank you. So that concludes our online local candidate forum. I would like to thank everyone who has been here tonight. I'd like to thank all of our sponsors, the League of Women Voters, for helping cover the captioning costs for this event, Franklin County Chamber of Commerce's office, the University of Maine at Farmington, and all the affiliated clubs that helped with this event as well. I'd like to apologize for the technology issues beforehand, but I would like to thank you for your patience within dealing with those. Scott, is there anything else you would like to say?
No, thank you, Sam, for your help. It was super helpful. And thank you all for participating. It came together pretty quick, but I think that we pulled it off. The new normal, the new technologies, the new hiccups that we're all sort of working through. But I appreciate you all taking the time and looking forward to getting out there and getting your vote in. Thank you. Have a great night. And thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Good night,
Thank you all.
Right.
Good job, Sam.
Thank you.
Good night.
Have a good evening.
Sam, do you recognize me from October 6th?
October 6th. Oh my gosh, yes, you were.
Oh, yes, we don't have to say anything. That's right.
Yes, I'm gonna stop recording this really quick. Sherry, thank you so much for everything you did today. I appreciate it.